If you know you got problematic folks, handle your problematic folk. Like, don't let stuff get out of control as a supervisor. I don't care how long they've been there. No, don't just address it because that could be your problem. Be proactive and address the issue. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Fast Forward podcast. We are continuing our conversation about employee relations, and I talked in the very first episode about how employee relations is primarily about the relationship between senior leadership, meaning the C-suite, including the CEO, and the employees, the frontline employees, and how everybody else in the middle of that relationship, in that whole ecosystem, is an agitator, whether they have positive or nefarious intent. I wanted to spend this episode speaking about the functions of employee relations. Y'all know that this podcast it's like a three-parter. So I talk a lot about leadership development, business transformation, but I also share a lot of insights about HR because I don't take for granted that everybody understands the science of HR, the art of HR. And I know that HR does not always do a good job of promoting itself very well. So I want to make sure that you all understand the functions of HR, whether you work in HR or not, even whether or not you're a business leader. Every single person who does work in the world, which is pretty much everybody who is not a child and who is not retired, to understand human resources. Employee relations is one of those things. It's similar to how learning and development, or L&D, shapes up, which is that if it's a small company, you probably won't see all the segmentations and job titles, but the functions are still there, even if they're not staffed. And so again, I want to try to name those functional areas. So as you think about how to advocate for yourself, if you are an employee and an individual contributor, how you want to support your teams if you're a people manager, or how you want to restructure your people and culture functions if you are a C-suite leader, to be able to provide more support and build better relationships between you and your employees. You're going to see me looking off to the side because I had a lot to write down about this, and I want to make sure that I capture all of it appropriately. So if you see me looking off, that's what I'm doing. So in my book, Evolution to Equity, I talk about employee relations as one of the 12 functional areas of HR. But what I didn't do is go into detail about what that means. I'll probably do that in my next book, which I'll talk about that probably in the next couple months, but stay tuned. Employee relations has a few functional areas. Now, again, dependent on how your company is set up, you may not have ever heard these names. They may be called something else. They may not even be named explicitly. They might just be a project or a task area that's assigned to one person who does something totally different. So don't get caught up necessarily in the name. Just pay attention to what this functional area does, and that should give you some more aha moments. So those functional areas are labor relations, workplace safety and ergonomics, well-being, behavior management, conflict management, communications, and policy management. So let's go through each of them individually. Labor relations, talked about that in the first one. That's the one we usually think of right away because we're typically thinking about labor union. But keep in mind, even if you do not have union positions, you still have some type of labor relations function, because HR leaders or senior leaders in the company could be negotiating policies, benefits, etc. with ERGs or affinity groups. They could be negotiating with professional associations for the different roles that are present. They could be negotiating with employees directly. And so I don't want everyone to get as hung up on labor unions, because I think sometimes when you work in a non-union role, you feel like, well, I don't have any coverage. And that's just not true. There are always ways to advocate for yourself. And there are always ways to stick up for yourself and be able to share what your needs are and potentially have them heard. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, and I'm going to talk about that in this month's Out of Scope episode. I think y'all are going to really enjoy that one. The second one, workplace safety and ergonomics. This is an interesting one. I worked this job one time, and every person had the opportunity to book a consultation with an ergonomics team member to do an audit of your workspace. So is your chair positioned in the right way? Are the arms high enough? Are they too low? Is your back appropriately cushioned? Is your desk sitting up high enough? If you wanted to have one of those desks that move up and down, like there were just all of these things that they looked at. It was really fascinating. Workplace safety can take on many different faces. If you are working in what would be considered a safety sensitive position, there are probably all types of federal, state, and even local guidelines that mandate you work in a certain way. That could include things like wearing safety glasses, wearing a certain type of shoes, making sure that you wear certain belts or attachments if you are working at a certain height. If you are driving for a living, you might have certain recommendations about attachments you can put on your seat in order to protect your body. For folks who work desk jobs, we don't always think about that, especially if we work remote. But I can think of ladies, especially like the executive assistant pool, they had all of the accoutrements on their desk, whether it was the funky looking keyboard design or the special cushion for their back. And I remember, especially when I started out in my career, I used to be cracking up like, how they got all that? And now I understand because I'm like, man, my back be hurting. I need a cushion. But you'll learn, hopefully, what you need over time. Please do not assume that because you don't work construction or you don't work lifting boxes that you don't have any requirements in workplace safety and workplace health that you need. You absolutely do. Even if you work from home, you absolutely have adjustments that you probably need to make. So, for example, my house tends to be dry, especially in the wintertime. I have a humidifier in my bedroom, and on my first floor, I have one of the big humidifiers that can give some moisture downstairs. I have a bunch of plants downstairs too, so I like for them to get a little bit of hydration in the air. But I was just thinking, I was like, wow, I need to put one up here because I noticed that the air is really, really dry. Ironically, it did snow here in Atlanta, which is so wild. But generally now is no snow. It may be some rain every now and then, but it's dry. And as a person who talks for a living, I do meetings, trainings, things like that. It wears on my sinuses. And I was like, I need to get a big humidifier that I could be able to run during the day up here, that it runs for at least 4 hours just to get this humidity up a little bit. And then, I could be able to switch over to the bedroom humidifier, which is a small one in the evening, because that is affecting my ability to do my work, but also my long-term health. Same thing with having desks that are the right height. I actually kind of changed my setup here. I had one type of desk and it was a height that was kind of optimal for typing. Then I got another one because I needed to space out my equipment for recording, and it's a little higher. And I was thinking, I'm like, this is not as comfortable. So I'm going to have to figure out something else for dealing with the keyboard because I type a lot. And so again, you might have all types of adjustments. It could be wearing the special glasses that won't that protect your eyes from the blue light. It could be that you do more dictation than typing so that you're not staring at a screen all day. It could be that you change your lighting. So maybe the ring light is too harsh for your eyes. You might need to look for a different type of light to keep your lighting going for when you're on remote calls. Whatever it is, please be thoughtful of that. Another aspect of workplace health and safety is thinking about the overall campus design. So if you are a person who does work in an office, do you all have outdoor spaces? Can you change your workplace position? So maybe you have a desk or a cubicle, but perhaps you're like, you know what? When I'm reading, I don't feel like being in the pool of all the folks. It's too noisy. I want to go sit in the conference room, or I want to go sit down near the lobby. Do you have those flexible spaces? I'll never forget, I'll probably say the best campus that I've worked on would have to be Disney's campuses. First of all, they were designed beautifully, and it was just like all of this Disney paraphernalia, which was so nostalgic. But the first campus that I worked on in particular, and the studio was like this too, now that I think about it, but the very first campus, It was called GC3. This is where like the Imagineering department was and stuff like that. It was very tech heavy. They had these beautiful outdoor areas. And I just remember thinking how peaceful it would be when I needed to ideate on something or just catch a break. Because as you walked out, they had just a line of fountains and benches that you could sit on. And then it was the little areas with the tables. So we would go and meet with folks and do our meetings out there sometimes so we didn't have to be stuck and cooped in the office. There was a library where you could go and sit and stuff. I mean, it was just wonderful to have those types of options. And I know a lot of tech campuses have that too. I've been on Meta's campus in what is that? Um, it's not Cupertino. Where is Meta's campus? No, Cupertino is Apple. I don't know why I can't think of it, but wherever Meta's main campus is, I've been over there. Beautiful campus. I know Yahoo's campus in Sunnyvale, because actually I used to work for, this was when Yahoo and AOL merged. I don't know what they're doing now, but I visited the Sunnyvale campus. Beautiful place. Again, you could go outside and do things. So that type of flexibility also impacts workplace health and safety because people get a chance to kind of clear their head. Now, where this becomes tricky is when you think about the availability of desk and office space. So I know this has come up a lot with these return to the office mandates, so RTO mandates. And people are like, we don't have enough desks, so I don't have an assigned desk. I've worked in environments where people had rotating desks and it was a disaster for most folks. The only people who I saw that really worked for were folks who worked all project work, meaning they constantly changed the people that they worked with, or sales folks or people like that who typically work in the field. Like they will go to places for things and they weren't always in the office. So let's say they might only have to be in the office 2 days a week anyway, and they rotate the days because they're going out meeting with clients, prospects, traveling, whatever. Everybody else, it was a disaster, especially for departments that dealt with sensitive information like legal, like HR, and like finance. So if I'm in HR and I'm having a conversation about somebody's performance improvement plan or PIP, I'm not trying to sit out in the whole open space with folks hearing so-and-so basically on their way to get fired. If I'm sitting down talking about the lawsuit, no, I'm not trying to have to rely on hoping I could book one of only 5 conference rooms for 1,000 people or talk out loud at my desk. I need to have private space. And so if you are a senior leader who is considering the return to office mandates, please keep in mind that won't apply to everybody. And there are some departments that you are going to want their privacy. It is not a special perk. It is not a pat on the back if you do good and if you my favorite. No, it is a legal vulnerability if they are not able to get the privacy that they need. And so I want y'all to be thoughtful about that. Also, if you are advocating for yourself around return to office, the conversation should be had with your manager to say, hey, over the past 12 months, these are how many legally sensitive issues I've had to deal with. What is the plan for when I have to have these phone calls? These legally sensitive issues take up 40%, 60% of my job. How do you want me to proceed with this? That type of documentation at least helps to protect you. So if it ever comes up, you all could be able to say, I told y'all. Next one, well-being. This includes things like employee assistance programs. This could be fitness benefits. I know several jobs offer either reimbursements or credits or bonuses if you do certain wellness activities. And of course, is in the business's best interest because they want to be able to keep you alive and healthy long enough to do work. Let's just keep it a buck. It's also really good for you because it can incentivize protecting yourself in ways that don't hurt your pockets. Let's keep it real. A lot of health related activities, especially if it's beyond just basic care, it costs a lot of money. So if your company is willing to reimburse gym memberships, it's willing to reimburse even gym equipment at home, if it's willing to reimburse going to see a therapist, a counselor, a life coach, a professional coach, whatever it is, use those benefits because you might not always get access to them, and they can help jumpstart a whole new level of wellness in your life. One of the things that I've benefited from has been working for a cluster of really good companies on the benefits side. And it hasn't always been the same type of benefits. It's interesting because I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. So when I worked in government, they had great health benefits. This is usually pretty well known that government agencies at the federal, state, and local level, they have great benefits. And especially for preventive care, for as a person like me who grew up working class, we didn't go to the doctor that often. I don't ever remember going to the dentist as a child, unfortunately. So being able to work places that had great benefits, since I've been an adult, I've never missed a cleaning. I've been able to go get dental care to correct things. I've been able to have access to preventive care with primary care doctors. I've been able to go see about other health issues with no problem. And that is a blessing. I've also been able to have access to care like therapists, other mental health services to be able to support my overall well-being. That's also a blessing because that stuff can get very, very, very expensive. And also, I've been able to have access to some unexpected benefits. So when I switched over to working for tech companies, they have a lot of family planning resources, things like access to services related to egg retrieval. And I'm going to talk more about that in the Dear Little Sis episode because I ended up doing a round of egg freezing. So I had great benefits when I worked at Amazon, and it saved me thousands of dollars on that process. But all of that is not just a part of benefits administration. That's also a consideration of employee relations because it's a consideration of employee well-being. So when I can buy more time to intentionally plan my family, guess what? I don't have to take off work, right? You don't have to worry about me having health complications related to family planning. It's not just these companies being altruistic and so nice because they care so much about you. They want you to be productive. They want to eliminate every excuse that you could have to not be productive. Use that to your advantage. All right, next area is behavior management. So we would think of this as like corrective action. This includes things like insubordination, absenteeism, workplace endangerment, assault, all kinds of issues. These are the things where they decide not only the consequences, but the sequence of it. I would say the job that I knew of that had the least, I'm not even going to name this company, but the job that had the least behavior management tools in hand, in writing, in a definite process, it was all type of shenanigans going on. And that was on one end of the spectrum. The one that was on the far other end was when I worked for the city of New York. And I could talk about this because it's a whole system for all the city agencies. Mentioned before that the city of New York is what's called a centralized agency system. So pretty much all the city's agencies follow the same promotion system, civil service system, corrective action system, disciplinary system, etc. I think the only outliers are police, fire, and education, if I'm not mistaken. So they have their own, which actually I think might be more strict. Yeah, I think it's stricter than even the ones that the other agencies go on. Don't quote me on that though. So with the city system, they had wasn't even 12. I want to say it was more like maybe 15 or 18 steps. So it was like 6 steps, but then you had 3 levels on each step. And so if you are a person who managed to get fired from the city of New York, you either had to be behaving so egregious that they was just like, we just got to throw it out, or you had to be acting out of pocket for so long that they could get through all of those steps. And I remember I had to learn it because I worked at HR for one of the agencies. I actually worked in HR for two of the agencies, but when I found out I was at this one particular agency and something came across my desk that I had to address. And I was like, why y'all don't just fire this person? Like, what the heck? Like, just get them out of here. And they were like, yeah, we can't. And I was like, what do you mean you can't? They done did this like 7 times. And they're like, yeah, but they only on like, what was it? Step 3, level 2. And I was like, well, what's the other steps? And they were like, yeah, you got to go all the way up to this. They ain't even halfway through it yet. So it was just known in the city that the easiest way for you to get a problem employee out of your way is to just transfer them to another agency, or the manager just needed to leave and transfer to another agency or department. And I just thought that that was so ridiculous. I still think it's ridiculous. This is nuts. It's like, why are y'all doing this? It's crazy. But on the other hand, it does stop people from retaliating against folks, punitive, corrective action, a lot of silliness, honestly, that can occur. So, like I said, that is on the far end of just being way too lenient in my eyes. But then you got other environments like that other company, which I refuse to name, that basically had no corrective action and it was just a free for all. Good companies range somewhere in. And so you should have some type of definitive, clearly written out, well publicized behavior management process with the steps or levels or whatever you want to call that sequencing, with the trigger action. So if you do this, then this. If you do this, then this. And the options for mitigation. Because let's keep it real. Some things are just egregious. Workplace violence comes to mind, where it's like, if you're doing that, you need to be out of here. But some things, you get smart with a supervisor in a team meeting. Okay, that's probably not a fireable offense, but we do need to mitigate that behavior before it gets more out of control. You're a person who's withholding information from a coworker, but it wasn't something that could potentially lead to severe or catastrophic consequences. Okay, we need to mitigate that behavior, but that's not necessarily a fireable offense. Having it clearly written out, the sequencing, and even suggestions for how managers can initiate conversations and handle conflict management, which we'll get to next. But those types of directives can be very helpful because some managers are very experienced. They've done this before. They might have even been at the company a long time, but sometimes you have new managers. They don't know anything about this stuff. They're new, or they haven't quite built trust, or they may not even feel comfortable asking for HR's guidance yet. So make it easy on people. It should be, again, easy to access, easy to read, clearly set up with clear sequencing, clear directives, clear conversation starters to help managers own this process on their teams. Because by the time HR gets involved, it's probably very serious. And if you are constantly involved in HR for any little thing, that's poor management. The first line of defense in behavior management is somebody's direct supervisor. It's not HR. HR is the next level up. So just keep that in mind too. All right, conflict management. Similarly, I switched that out or pulled that out of behavior management because conflict management shouldn't always lead to a write-up, right? It shouldn't even always lead to a verbal warning. Conflict management is just what it said. A leader being able to manage interpersonal conflict on their team. People have disagreements. People have differences of thought. People have differences of value systems, of role clarity. A lot of conflict management, to be honest, should be more preventive than prescriptive. So by the time you get to the point where there's an open conflict, there's probably been a lot that was brewing under the surface. As a leader, whether you're a frontline supervisor all the way up to the C-suite, your responsibility is, first of all, to have role and job clarity. So when I think about pretty much all of my jobs, the main problems that came up where it required conflict management was somebody not knowing their job or choosing not to stay in their job. So it was one job I worked. It's funny when I think about this stuff because it's so childish. I was responsible for handling the testing processes for this particular office. And I had to have these books. And you had the testing books with the questions, but then you had the answer sheets, which were, they had the, what do you call it? It's like when you like block it in and then you can open it up and see what the right answer is versus what they put. I can't think of what that little sheet would have been called, but anyway, it was the testing sheets. They cost a lot of money. And of course, this was like a quasi-governmental organization, so they ain't like to spend money. So they were like, look, we budgeted out for you to get a certain number of these books every year or every quarter based off of how many people come into this place. If I see you ordering more than that, then I'm wondering what's going on with you. So you need to protect these because your coworkers will come and take them and they won't put them back. I'm like, all right, fine. So I put them up. I would have them locked, but I had so many tasks in my job that I would be away from my desk a lot, and people would just go in there, unlock it, and just take what they wanted. Now, here's the other level with this. Everybody at this job was old enough to be my parent and my grandparent, except for maybe one other young person, and that was weird, me and her relationship. So they felt like they could just run all over me. And it was like 80% women. The person who was over the whole office was an older man. So he was one of those men where it's like, literally, you could describe it as him thinking of it as cackling hens, where it's just so it was like he just tuned all of it out. So I knew unless it got real serious, I couldn't go complain to him. So we get to this one day, and I'm looking for these tests because I'm getting ready. When did testing happen? I think testing happened 2 days a week. Yeah, I think it was like 2 days a week or something. No, it was one day because every other day it was orientation. So we would get to this testing day. So I knew to get my stuff prepared like 2 days before. That way, if I needed to go down to the storage room or ask somebody else to go to the storage room because it was another lady who was in charge of storage and get some more books or whatever. So I was like half short on the books. In my head, all I could picture was this man finna go off. I already know he finna go off because he didn't already told me he got to order these books before his time is about to be a problem. Take like a week for the books to come in. I'm like, what in the world? So I go around asking like, hey, look, for real, because I know y'all be going in here taking these books. If y'all got the books, like you don't even have to tell me. Just put them on my desk while I'm in this other meeting, please, because I need them for tomorrow. Everybody want to act like they don't have these books. So it was one lady, I knew she had the books. I knew she had these books. So I was like, look, I know you got these books, man. Just give me the books. Give me the sheets. Please. I need you to put them on desk. I can't do my job. She thought she was going to be slick. No, she don't want to give them to me. So I go to the meeting. It was like a 2-hour thing. I had to be there. Come out, ain't no books on it. Still got the same number of books. So I'm finna snap. Oh, I'm about to snap. By that time, I guess we were talking in elevated voices. So the office director came out and was like, okay, what's going on? I'm like, you taking my books, Papa. I mean, I'm going off. Going off, y'all. So he pulled me to the side. Now he corrected me. No, you know how people get. You can't let them see you sweat. Blah, blah. I was like, man, you know they be taking my books like on off, y'all. So when it all went down, he knew who had the books. It'd be the same people pulling stuff. I go, he was like, go take lunch, go leave, come back. I come back, it's all these books on my desk. So whoever he knew to talk to, they went and replaced them. And eventually that person got fired. When they got fired, y'all, do you know this person had like 100? I was trying to count in my head, like 100 of them books and about 70 of them testing sheets. Y'all, you already know I was finna snap. So I'm like, but the point is this. Yeah, it's funny now. It was not funny then. Let me say that. But the sad part was he knew how them people was getting down from the beginning. And that's the whole point that I want to make here. If you know you got problematic folks, handle your problematic folk. Like, don't let stuff get out of control as a supervisor. I don't care how long they've been there. I don't care how many new people you got. I don't care how many problems you got on your desk you got to handle. Stuff can easily get out of control. And the only reason why he really got involved is because we used to have observers come like from the city and the county, and they would come as secret shoppers. So when we started talking and yelling, then it was like, oh crap, what if the city or what if the county in there? No, don't just address it because now it could be your problem. Be proactive in addressing issues. This is especially true if you know you have an influx of new employees coming in. You know who the folks are who basically be hazing employees, who love to have control, the influencers who influence for bad, not for good, right? Like, handle that as a manager and a leader. All right, I'll leave that alone. Next is communications. So you probably have, especially if you're at a large company, an HR communications, either employee who handles this or even a whole department. But if you're a smaller company, this either is handled by anybody and there might not be too many standards, or is one person who got to take care of so much stuff that it often goes under the rug. But I put comms as a specific function of employee relations because you can get in a lot of legal trouble when you don't communicate things appropriately. Some of the things that are required as far as employee relations communications, those posters that go in break rooms that are required, please make sure that you are staying on top of that. And then also posting about new laws. So, for example, there are a lot of laws coming out about pay transparency, gender equity, things like that. A lot of it requires that you publicly post that or share that somewhere. So if you have an intranet, if you have even some type of shared folder where you point employees to go look at new policies or new laws, make sure that there's somebody assigned to do a review. I would say at least maybe like once a month to check that stuff out, because again, you can get in a lot of legal trouble if it's not communicated. This also applies to things like crises management. For example, unfortunately, the fires that are happening right now in the LA area, you have to notify people of things right away if people are being called off, if you want people to shelter in place. Like all of that stuff matters. It's snow here in Atlanta. If you know you are telling people don't come into the office, or it's inclement weather, or there's some type of danger, or you have a different entrance for people that is safer than the normal entrance, if you don't communicate that, that's a lawsuit. If you don't have the bandwidth or the staff to have a whole department do this, that's cool. I totally understand. But you need to at least have somebody who is looking out for changes. And if you need to, just create a template, right? So it could almost look like a bulletin. Like I remember when I worked CTA, Chicago Transit Authority. The announcements and bulletins, it was the same format and it was coded in a certain way. You knew that the date was in a certain place. It would say who it was from, what it was for, what action needed to be taken, what job titles this applied to. Like it was deeply standardized. So you can have it where it's very much structured. So you ain't got to be trying to reinvent the wheel every time, but you do need to have something. And even more important, and this ties into the next one, you need to have a place where you archive this to keep track of the fact that it was shared, to keep track of what number or version of it is. Because sometimes, let's say you come out with something that says, come in this entrance of the building, but the next month. Well, when that changes, you probably need to put out another communication that says, okay, now come into this entrance. And if that changes again, then you have version 3 or version 4, etc. So again, the archival process is extremely important, which leads me to my very last one, policy management. We assume that when we have verbal conversations with employees that that's good enough. But again, that archival information management system makes a huge difference. You may need to have a folder that is specific just for you as the manager of original versions of things, right? Saving emails. It could be saving read receipts of who saw something. It could be saving the signatures if you sending things out electronically. All of that matters, because if you are not responsible, if you are not intentional, if you are not mindful of all of the things that you are sharing with people to help keep your workplace safe, engaged, profitable, functional, again, that's a legal vulnerability and it hurts morale. So those are all the areas of employee relations. I really hope that that helped to paint the picture. If you heard all of this information and you like, girl, I ain't got all those people on hand to do all that stuff. A lot of companies don't. And even large companies, sometimes they don't either know to do it or prioritize doing it. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you need an individual person for all of these. It does mean that that is a function. And even if you have one person, hope is more than one, but if you had 2 or 3, or somebody who does it part-time, or you outsource it to another company, to be honest, a consultant could do this. I've actually worked with clients on doing a few of these functions to help get them started. However you do it, it needs to be handled because every single one of those areas needs to be covered. All right. Let me know down in the comments, what are some of your employee relations battle stories, whether it led to victory or defeat like me. I had some good and some bad. Let me know down in the comments. And if you have any questions about employee relations, please feel free to ask them in the comments. I do my best to answer them or point you in the direction of some really cool resources. Until next time, I will catch y'all later. Be sure to check out the next 2 episodes because that's going to be Out of Scope, which I think y'all are going to really love. And Dear Little Sis, I'll catch y'all in the next one. Bye.